seen, or read the books, the series, The Hunger Games? Yeah, yeah. Can you believe it? It's young adult fiction. If you're not familiar with the story, it's about a futuristic dystopian government country where every year, for about 75 years at the point of the first book, they take two people from each of the districts, one boy and one girl, and they train them and they have them fight one another until the death. They are tributes to the nation, to the government. It's supposed to be a reminder of what the districts have done 75 plus years ago. Rebel against that government, against the oppression that it suffered. It's interesting if you read the books compared to the movie. Books, it's more stark. The contrast between those living in the districts who work in mines, in factories, on farms, compared to the lifestyle of those who live and plan at the capital city. The writer Suzanne Collins, she wrote this book after she was watching TV. This was about 2012, around that time. She was flipping between channels of reality television and then of news reports about young people, 18 years old, 19 years old, dying in the tragedies of war. A war that's, let's be honest, we initiated. What she wrote about this book in part was to demonstrate the trauma that young people experience in war, the devastation of that violence. These youngsters who have no say in how their parents live, who have no say in what their government does, these children suffer. And that's why she wrote this book. How often in the machines of war we sacrifice children for our own gain and ambition, whether it's the ambition of the leader or of the country itself. Our story today should make us feel uncomfortable. How many of you feel uncomfortable with this story? You're like, what does the story have to do with us? Why is it included? Why is one of the founder of our faith, the father of our faith, so to speak, with Sarah as well, has this story where he goes out. He goes out because God says to him, go and sacrifice your son. We wonder and question, well, how could a God ask this of a man, of a son, especially since Abraham and Sarah had been waiting all of their life, 70 plus years, for them to have a son together. This story should make us confused and wondering. People like Soren Kierkegaard, a great existentialist theologian of the 1800s, he talked about how this is it's absurd, but in the absurdity of it, it demonstrates a sense of faith. And of course, like all biblical stories, there are multiple layers. So today, though, I want to focus a little bit on Isaac's story. So much attention is paid to Abraham that we forget what this story might have meant to Isaac. Imagine being a young boy. Your father takes you out. Maybe you think it's an excursion. You're going to go hike a mountain, so to speak. You're unsuspecting of what's about to happen. And then your father says to the servants, stay here, and they continue on. Now they get to the place where Isaac will be bound by his just as his father is about to plunge the knife into him, the angel of the Lord says, whoa, stop. You've proven, Abraham, that you have this faith. Imagine the PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder you're going to feel. Imagine what all those children in war feel. That post-traumatic stress disorder. If you've seen images of children in Gaza, you will see how scared they are. You see the images of children in Iran. You see the images of children in Civil War-plagued areas. You'll see the post-traumatic stress. This story that we have here is a story of saying to us that God does not require sacrifice to be appeased. A story like this is a type of story that early theologians of the Israelite religion, what they were saying was this, that God does not need child sacrifice to be appeased. Now, there have been tribes around the world and in this region of the Middle East 2,000 some years ago who did practice child sacrifice. If we even see it in the book of Jeremiah, one of the condemnations that Jeremiah condemns the Israelite people is because some of them are sacrificing children to Baal. And Jeremiah says that God does not require sacrifice to appease God. How do we treat children in a society determines how we are as a society. How many of us remember the old saying, seen but not heard? Children should be seen but not heard. I remember hearing that when I was a kid and thinking, well, I don't like that. That's not nice. That's not good. As a child, I should be able to speak up and say if something that my parents or my grandparents or an uncle or aunt have done is wrong. As we know, we've all had parents or guardians, or we've all been parents or guardians. In one of those categories, we know that parents or guardians don't always make the wisest of choices. When we silence children, it hinders them from speaking up. It teaches children to be docile, to never question authority. And sometimes, to the extreme, it teaches kids to be silent when an adult abuses them. That's not what we want. We want children not to be silent, but we want them to vocalize their concerns, to tell us their feelings, to tell us what they are thinking. When we listen to a child, it will inform our interactions with them, and it will teach us what their needs are. You know, one of the things that often you like to say is, oh, Josh, I like your children's message. And I always go, well, the children's message, I actually don't work that much time on. The sermon I work a lot of time on. But one of the reasons that is so powerful, one of the reasons why the children's message for me, I don't need to spend a whole lot of time on it because I have this ethos within myself to treat kids with dignity and respect, to hear them and to see them. You know, one of the things that people noticed when I first started here is I didn't stand up walking around from the kids. I do that sometimes. But when I got here, I first started, I got a chair down and I sat to be on the same level of them, to see them. You know, one of the things I try to embody is Mr. Rogers. I like to describe myself. I'd like to be a combination of Mr. Rogers and Willy Wonka. Listening to children, letting them speak, will inform us of what we need to do, to listen to their needs, and to ensure that if they are mistreated or abused, Jesus teaches us to love children and to care about them. He lived in a society at the time where children were disregarded. They were set onto the margins. There's even a story in our Gospels where the disciples push the children out to the side, but Jesus says no, and he brings the children into the circle. Jesus teaches us this lesson of listening to the voices of the youngsters. He teaches that we are not to sacrifice children, but we are to love them and to listen. Too often, though, we still sacrifice youngsters in the name of God. Many wars still are committed through the name of God. Too often, we as well in our own society sacrifice children to our addiction to guns and our inability to find ways to have solutions. 44,000 people a year die from gun violence, any kind of gun violence. The leading cause of death in children is gun violence. What do we do? What do we do when we learn that cars can be dangerous to people? We regulated them, we put seatbelts in. This idea that there's nothing that we can do doesn't make sense to me. All we're doing is worshiping at the altar of gun manufacturers, and I say these things as one who has used guns, shot guns, and killed things, and who lives with family who do so still. But there are things that we don't need to sacrifice youngsters. And so many times youngsters are telling us what they need us to do, and they fall on silent ears, usually with the hands of power. We're also sacrificing children's futures when we continue to ignore the plight of climate change. Look at Europe this last week or last 2 weeks. That is a result of climate change. They used to not have to have air conditioning, but now they are rethinking that they need to have it to survive. Or we might remember in the last 10 to 15 years the polar vortexes coming down. Or we may remember that there is less and less snow. I remember hearing stories of family members talking about how the snow would be up to their body, up to here. Hardly, if ever, that is something we experience even down here. Oftentimes, we also sacrifice to the ambitions of presidents and prime ministers and supreme leaders. Rather than coming together and talking about common different shared hopes and aspirations for their people, they usually just think about their own power and greed. But God does not ask for child sacrifice. God asks us to listen to children, to listen to their cries. God does not demand sacrifice. God demands that we treat children with dignity and respect, and that's listening to their voices. Let us give them a life that will allow them to flourish and live lives of